Reporting live from Colorado is Dave Guthrie, who is here to tell you guys about a news story breaking out. All the gas stations in Colorado are filled with diesel only. Only diesel options available, and we need everybody to know that this is an ongoing story. Dave, tell everybody about the 50 gas stations that are supposedly dishing out diesel instead of regular.
Yeah, so it's a really unfortunate set of circumstances where the number is increasingly counting. Apparently, it's up to about 51. I think as of yesterday, it was somewhere, last time I checked, around 25 confirmed gas stations. But apparently, there was a contamination effect that happened where a tanker went and mixed contaminated diesel fuel with number of gas stations around Colorado, a total of 51 as of its current report and counting. It's definitely a widespread, very, very severe issue. That being said, as far as I'm under the understanding, I don't know. I'm under the understanding it was into the regular. So I think that may exclude some of the premium options. So maybe if you have premium, you got away with it.
So, Dave, you're saying that all WRX owners are probably safe unless they are dum-dums and are putting regular fuel in their WRX. Is this true?
There's a possibility. Again, I don't know the finer details, but from what I've seen, I do believe it is on the regular end of the fuel that they pump this and mix this into. And that goes out saying, I think there's the varying degrees of severity here. I mean, depending on the gas station and what level their underground fuel tanks were at when they got topped up with this mixture, that could range from maybe your car running a little bit poorly, but not enough to throw a check engine light, to a number of cars reportedly have just shut down. Cars have literally stopped running. And so I think it goes to show if maybe, I don't know, this is a balance. Maybe if the more frequented gas stations that go through a lot more volume were more prone to having more of this gas that was contaminated mixed in versus other ones.
I think that what's pretty concerning is the stretch here. I mean, you're talking 51 gas stations. I mean, okay, for anybody who's listening, I have a microphone, and this is our new news report. So I'm hoping that AJ in editing can do some news magic in the background here. But we're coming to you live to basically tell you that most of Denver, Colorado is fucked. 51 diesel stations popping up after they did not have diesel before, I'm sure, are now, you guessed it, regular diesel. It's mixed in, people.
Yeah.
I would say this is ridiculous. I think that in the terms of mass fuck ups, this is pretty bad. I think, to dish out accidentally diesel, right, to one gas station, 5 gas stations, 10 gas stations, some kind of regular diesel mix that you accidentally mixed up. 51 gas stations. Think about how many cars go to a gas station a day.
Yeah.
I don't even know how they will come back from this. Like, I think that this is they are going to have to
They'll be fine. They're gas companies. They'll be all right. The problem is there's a lot of deflection too, though, because a lot of deflection falls on whether or not the companies, the bigger corporations rather, decide to say, well, it's up to the independent franchisees to deal with this, which I don't think it is. I think you're ultimately the supplier and they trust that they're getting an accurate supply. And the other big question I think that has not been addressed is whether or not there needs to be a change, because I know for a fact you cannot put a diesel nozzle into a gasoline fuel car. It won't fit. They've done their due diligence in making sure that they don't want the consumer level making that accidental mistake. The problem is, what about these fill-up stations? Do they maybe need to have different size receptacles, and filling protocols to where they cannot make this mistake. I think this raises a bigger question on a corporate level, because you're right, the extent of the cost that this is going to ensue is going to be massive.
I think what is the most astounding thing here is that we're looking at the list of gas stations here, right? King Supers, there's like 10 of. Costco, there's like 10 of. S&S Fuels Sinclair, so all Sinclair stations, there's like 10 of those. 5 Circle K stations, 5 Safeway stations, Murphy
Doesn't matter
Express,
where you went.
RB Food
Yeah.
and Gas, Valero. Like this is what's important here is that it doesn't matter where you go. They're all getting gas from the same place. It's, it's crazy to me that like you might think that you're getting better gas going to a Costco or a Circle K or whatever, but like it's all the same. They're getting it from the same supplier. That's how 51 places ended up with the same shit. It's
That's
insane.
the other part of this news break, is that this really exposes that underbelly that people don't really realize. They think they have the perception of choice in a certain capacity. You think you're going with Shell versus, their Platinum V fuel or whatever. Doesn't matter. You could be on the same boat.
Now, Dave, as a Coloradian, now you have quite a few vehicles that run regular. Are you scared to go to the gas station?
Not as much now. I think that the issue has been kind of rectified to a point. That being said, I've fortunately not had to fill up any of my vehicles as of recent. And most of my Subarus all take premium. The few that do take regular, the only one that I think that takes regular, my only Subaru, is the Shop Baja, which, as we all know, is still running 1,500 miles strong on canola oil.
Now,
And
Dave, I have to stop you there. We need another breaking news story here, because I cannot tell you the amount of messages I've been getting in this last week, actually. People want to know what happened to the Baja. They want to know the mileage. They want to know where we're at. Let the people know.
I don't know an exact mileage offhand. However, I promise as of tomorrow, and that's going to be a little bit early dated because these podcasts come out a little bit later. But I will post a live update tomorrow, live, for anyone, so we can get a exact update on the mileage. I'll post that in the group tomorrow.
That's what I'm talking about, people. We're getting a live update in the Subaru Mechanics Facebook group. That's the group that you got to find us in. If you want, check the featured tab. Dave is a sponsor, so Dave not only gives discounts to people who are in the group, but he is going to be featured on the top of the page when you get there. So this is
Be sure to check in for the Subaru Baja update.
Yeah. We're still taking guesses on how long till it explodes. It is running on canola oil, Crisco brand. And yeah, it's going great. There's no metal and it's not low on oil. Surprisingly,
And it's not knocking.
It's not doing any Subaru things at this point.
Yep. I'll start it up live in the video tomorrow too, so everyone can hear there's no knocking, cold starting.
Amazing. I'm actually kind of liking having the microphone. I'm going to tell you guys, this is a very interesting story. I think that if it continues to get worse, which, I hope it doesn't, but also, I love when things like this get updated. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. I think Dave and I are going to keep tabs on it and just continue from there. In other news, I think that Subaru has covered, we've covered quite a bit of it, but they have some new cars out. I know that the internet has been peppered with videos of this so far. So Dave and I are going to save that for the end, our take on these Subarus that came out at the Tokyo Auto Salon. Really cool cars. Interested to talk about the race car and, the STI, which I guess everybody's bummed about, which I get. And we're going to talk about a couple other, future possibilities. These topics are hard because it's already been hammered so much. So, Dave and I are going to give our opinion on it at the end here. But we have a very exciting segment for you guys. Now, I was having a conversation with a man today who came into my work, and he was a big Cadillac guy, and he was saying like how much he loves CT5s. And I was like, CT5s, they're cool. I like them. You know, I'm really a CTSV guy. If I was going to pick a Cadillac, I think they're amazing. You know, I've always had it in my head that if I wanted a really sick 600 horsepower bulletproof car, that would be it. Then I started working on automotive and I realized how Cadillacs are. Now, something that Cadillac did that was really interesting that has always stuck in my brain was that Cadillac, if you guys have never heard of it, they did something called Book by Cadillac, which was a failed program that they ran. Essentially, good idea, sort of, bad process. The issue was that Cadillac wanted to give their okay, so let me put it this way. Cadillac knows that people who own Cadillacs have a lot of money. So they thought, how could we get more of people who buy Cadillacs money without dealing of the problems that come with owning a Cadillac? And then they came up with the idea of what if, like everything else today, we make it a subscription? So what they did was they said for somewhere between 1,500 to 2,500 bucks a month, it was a tiered system. You could essentially drive a Cadillac, and then I believe it was 2 or 3 times a month, you could go to the dealer and you could just leave the car and pick up another Cadillac. Any Cadillac you wanted. You could just go and let's say you drive a CTSV, you know, for the weekend, and then you're like, I gotta go daily something. I'm gonna go get an electric Cadillac, or I'm gonna go get like, you know, just a normal sedan for like work. And then your buddy asks you to go on a weekend trip, and you're like, well, now I want an Escalade because I need the extra room and I want to fit everybody in it with the skis and it, you know, whatever. Sounds great on paper. The thing that Cadillac didn't realize is that their owners like to own things. They have the money to buy a Cadillac. If they wanted 2 Cadillacs, they would just buy 2 Cadillacs. So, you know,
Yeah.
the subscription program didn't really work. And there was low utilization, so a lot of cars sat idle with the program. Luxury buyers prefer ownership for the prestige versus like a subscription program where they don't really own it. It's kind of like leasing. Like
Mhm.
they're like, why would I lease? And
I can
then
afford to buy this with no payments.
yeah. And then the other part of it was that there was high logistics overhead. So cleaning, transport, insurance, all that stuff.
Maintenance costs.
Yeah. Now, I want you all to know, I went in the think tank today and I was thinking to myself, I love the idea. I just don't know how it could be possibly put into a way that it would work well for essentially Subaru owners and for you. I came up with an idea where I think it would work and would be a pretty cool idea for Subaru owners. So if we were going to do a Subaru lease, technically, so this is what I did. I looked up the cheapest Subaru lease that you can get. I looked up the most expensive Subaru lease that you could get. And I'm using that as a baseline, essentially like Cadillac did with the 1,500 to 2,500 kind of thing, where I'm trying to figure out exactly how cheap or how expensive Subaru would have to make it to do a rental program. Typically in this market for like a 36-month, 10 to 12,000 miles a year lease, with a base model, something cheap like a base Impreza trim or base Crosstrek trim, you're looking at 260 to 320 a month. The effective cost for Subaru is between 230 to 270 a month. So they don't make a ton of money on these leases. Uh, with the most expensive one being an STI or an Ascent Touring or an Outback Touring XT, and those are approximately 650 to 750 a month. So cost Subaru around 6 to 680, it says. So right off the rip, Dave, I was thinking that on the low end, right? To make this possible, let's just talk pricing for a second. At a tier 1, for you to be able to swap between an Impreza, a Crosstrek, and a Forester, right? You would be limited to 2 swaps per month, $690.
How much you thinking?
For you to be able to swap 2 times a month between an Impreza, a Crosstrek, and a Forester, it would be $699 a month.
Okay.
Um, this is like you're always gonna get a new car, right? Like something with like sub 10,000 miles, let's say. Tier 2 would be adventure and performance. So you would get access to Outback XT, Rear X, and all wilderness trims. You would be able to swap out
Okay.
5 times a month. That one would be $8.99 a month. So that one's kind of like the enthusiast package, right? You get a little bit of the off-road, a little bit of the performance, like, it's kind of a good mix in there. And then tier 3, which is the full lineup access. So this is any Subaru, including Ascent Touring, performance, specialty trims, unlimited swaps, fair use policy. So you get to just swap constantly. It doesn't matter. You could swap a different car every day. Sierra style logistics. So they'll bring the car to you and swap it for you. That one would be $11.99. And mind you, you don't have to do any oil changes. You are essentially leasing, but the lease never ends, and you can always swap which car you want without having to go through the hassle of paperwork. You
You
don't have to
cancel, they come take the car away, and you don't have a car.
and you don't have to constantly run your credit. You don't have to worry about owning multiple cars. The pain point of Cadillac was the pricing and what you get, and being that their owners like to own their vehicles. While I think Subaru owners like to own their vehicles, I think that Subaru owners are very adventurous, and they like to do a lot of different things. And I think that this opens up the realm of, like, you could go grab a wilderness, whatever, take it off-roading, right? Go back to the dealer, drop it off, pick up a WRX, drive a WRX all week, swap the STI back in for an Ascent Touring, go down for, like, it's just the ability to be able to swap back and
Yeah.
forth.
The adaptability, I think, is definitely intriguing. I think the initial concerns obviously surround whether or not it's viable from a manufacturer level, to be able to sustain that, because essentially you're almost talking about a rental car in a likeness. And from one capacity, some of us do not treat rental cars the nicest because they're not ours and we don't really care. So there has to be, obviously, there will be an inherent liability. So if you bring the car or they take the car back and the thing is damaged to a certain extent, they're going to charge you for it. As well as if you go and just do something reckless with it, you're going to obviously be held liable. Beyond that, I think the biggest problem why I don't know that, and maybe it could be a divisionary kind of option, but I think you hit the nail on the head. When it comes to Subarus, generally, Subaru is a very niche brand in and of itself already. The owners of those vehicles are very passionate about their vehicles, and they want to individualize them and personalize them to their own degree. And when you talk about, yeah, there's an adaptability, I think I even see where you look at so many users or vehicle owners of pickup trucks because they like having a pickup truck. They don't care it gets bad gas mileage. They don't care they don't need to ever use the truck bed. They just care if they crash into you, they're bigger than you in your Ford Escort. That's all they
Now,
care about.
something that I think is interesting is that this is there's a big area that we're not mentioning, which is young kids, right? If you think about it, right, 99 a month, any kid that is working that can afford to just throw down 900 bucks to drive a WRX for a month is probably going to give that a shot.
At least for a
Where
month.
well, where are you gonna go to get a lease or buy a car where they allow you to put down $8.99 as a down payment, and then you can afford the payments after that? You could, like, these kids could go pay $8.99 for the month, right? Get the WRX, drive it for 30 days, and then at the end of it, just give it back and just cancel the subscription.
Or wreck it in the first week and then owe the company a lot of money.
That's also true. But, something that's cool about this is that you could essentially, right? This is my big idea here. Let's say, like, you, right? You're in Colorado and you flew out here for Boxer Fest on the East Coast. You would be able to go to the Subaru dealer out here, pick up an STI and drive it to Boxer Fest, right? You wouldn't have to drive your own car cross country to go to an event for Subarus. You could go to the dealer and just pick up whatever Subaru you want to bring to the event, you know? Like, I think that
Yeah,
there's a fun side of that where, like,
absolutely. That's a really good take. And I think there's a way that it could be viable. I just don't know that, or I think I'd be hard pressed to think that the business, any business or any company, manufacturer would basically undertake that as their entirety of their business model. Basically, I think there's so much that encompasses that. I think it'd be kind of a niche market. And then the other question I also have is, what if I show up unexpectedly? Because you said there's no expectations. Okay, I show up and I said, I want a Subaru Ascent for the weekend to go off-roading and camping. I'm sorry, we gave our last one out. What?
Yeah.
Well, go get me a brand new one off your lot and give it to me. Well, we can't do that. We have these designated cars in this fleet. So I think that would present a new challenge onto the dealerships that would have to basically undertake purchasing, because the dealerships ultimately are going to be responsible. The manufacturer is going to defer as much as they can to make the dealerships ultimately responsible for buying these vehicles outright in some capacity, and then effectively starting their own rental company out the back door, with the manufacturer's blessing. So, and the finance options and legal precedents. So I get they have some help there, but I don't think it goes to say that the dealerships would be struggling to keep up with it. And I think the other question is there a mileage restriction?
So,
Because some people might just drive 100,000 miles a year. And what does that do to your bottom line now?
So this is where I was going to go into subscription economics and what must be covered. So for everybody listening at home, I want to hear in the comments if you guys think that this is a good idea and if you guys would ever get a Subaru subscription and what car you guys would be driving. Now, Dave, subscription economics, things that Subaru needs to cover is vehicle depreciation, insurance, which would be fleet rated, maintenance and wear, cleaning, transport, swap handling, idle time risk. So cars that are idle, that are just sitting on the lots that are waiting to be picked up for this program that they have to keep to the side for it, so extra inventory. And then margin. Is it worth it? The safe rule for subscriptions is you want one and a half to 2 times the weighted average lease cost. So if a normal lease would cost you $400 on a WRX, then you want $800 for the subscription. Because again, like that extra $400 needs to cover the depreciation, the insurance, the wear and tear, the transport, swap handling, all this stuff is going to be covered in that. So they need to find that money somewhere. And I think that in you benefiting from being able to pick whatever you want, they need some extra money to cover their side. Now, I have listed here a couple reasons why Subaru would potentially win if they went down this route. Lower MSRP than like luxury brands, so it's able to be a little bit cheaper. High resale values, so controlled depreciation, right? Cadillacs depreciate like crazy, so for every mile you put on, right, you're losing more money than you would in a Subaru. So higher resale values, controlled depreciation. So basically Subarus aren't going to totally drop from putting all this mileage on. Shared platforms and powertrains, so predictable maintenance. You're not going to have all these weird one-offs that Cadillac has with all these weird maintenance things that pop up.
North Star.
Yeah. Lifestyle brand loyalty. So customers value use over status. So I think that like, whereas Cadillacs, like one engine blows up and that person goes and just buys a BMW. I think with Subarus, like they know what they're getting. So they're not scared of driving these cars. And when something goes wrong, it doesn't throw them from buying another one. So I think that like, as far as the subscription program goes, like they would have no problem getting another one. Then geographic clustering as well. So Colorado, right? The Northeast, parts of California, right? Subarus are huge. I think that like it's efficient to keep a lot of these cars on standby and to do a subscription program in cities or big areas that are big on these cars. So obviously you wouldn't offer this like out in the middle of Oklahoma, but you could offer it in New York City, New Jersey, like
major hubs,
Illinois, like there's just Denver, obviously, like where you're at. So, if Subaru ever did this right, the magic number, I think, would have to be $900 a month. I think that's where you beat leasing math, you beat insurance hassle, still let someone wake up one day and say, I'm going to drive a WRX, and then the next day, I need an Ascent. I think that Cadillac shot for the moon, and I think that Subaru could take what their failure was and they could alter it into a winning game plan. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, there's always learning from someone else's mistakes. I mean, famously, and so you're right. There's a lot of room for improvement, and I think it's really derivative of brand differences, and Subaru and Cadillac, couldn't be, almost further from each other in a lot of ways. Not in a bad way. I just think they're just different, vehicles, different users, different owners, and I still think with Subaru, I think I would struggle a lot because there is so much of Subaru that is personal. And that's another thing, let us know down in the comments what you guys think. If you think you would ever do this because you can't put your little emblem on the front, on the steering wheel and on the front grille and do your modifications and lift it, or lower it and put a bigger turbo on it. I think that's what makes Subaru so much of Subaru. Beyond that, I think there are certainly companies that could maybe encompass this. And it's intriguing in the bigger sense because I think they maybe could do it. I guess the first one that comes to mind is maybe like Hyundai, for example. They could offer it, and their vehicles are already on the affordable spectrum from a cost to build comparison. No
Yes,
offense, I
for
just think
for $300 a month, you can buy or you could subscribe to Hyundai and you could drive a oil-eating, blown-up Elantra, or you could drive a blown-up, oil-eating Veloster, or you could drive.
I think they've come a long way, and I think they could also encompass that, like you said, that kind of that offering because look at their Subaru hasn't done anything with it but tease, the return of the Baja or the Brat, you know.
Yeah.
They even released the recent, Gymkhana, and yet when are they gonna build a mini truck again? Meanwhile, Hyundai's built one, they're out there kind of going for the moon and kind of have a very diverse portfolio in my mind. And so I think they could be a prime candidate. Maybe even Ford as well could I think step into the ring and say, "Hey, we're going to offer a Ford offership, a subscription where you can drive a, I'm sorry, I don't know every Ford model, but let's say a Ford, hybrid as your daily, and then, you know what? I need to move a pickup, or move a couch. Let me borrow a pickup truck for the weekend, and or I wanna go camping, let me borrow a Ford, Excursion, whatever.
Now, Dave, I have what I think is the smoking gun that is gonna sell you on this, right?
Hmm.
I think that this could be the biggest win that Subaru ever gets. And I'm gonna tell you why. What is your experience when you go to the dealer and you wanna go test drive a car?
You get sized up immediately. I think it's the first thing. It's whether or not you can afford the car and whether or not the salesman's even gonna dignify you, on a certain level. I feel like everyone has that feeling.
What can you say about the experience? Do you think that it's a friendly, like, you can test drive any car you want, you could be there all day?
I think it depends on the dealership, and that's not so much the brand. I think that really ultimately depends on the dealership
I
because
agree
every
with that.
dealership is independent.
I think, right, that the biggest place where dealers lose is that they cannot control salesmen, and every salesman is different, and they all come off different. They are either aggressive or they're laid back or they don't care or they don't do things properly or they don't explain features or they got somewhere to be or they got a bigger client coming in and they don't have time for you and they just need you to pick the car that you want and get out. I need to make my money. I need to make my sales. You own a Forester? I'm only going to show you Foresters today because I know that you already own a Forester and I'm going to sell you another one. You had an Outback when you were a kid? Guess what? We're going to go look at Outbacks. You know what this program does, Dave? This is the best sales potential that this could ever be for Subaru. You know why? Because when you go to the dealer, right? If Subaru could make this a little cheaper, right? Let's just say, right, in a magical world, they could do this for $600. Let's just say they chalk up the extra $300 to marketing, right? Or whatever extra it would be to get to the 900. You would
First
get
tier. first
Yeah.
tier.
Let's just say you're somebody who never thinks that you need to drive anything more than a base model because you're not fancy. You don't need the heated steering wheel. You don't need the big screens. You don't need the nice sound system. You don't need the heated seats. But whoa, there's a subscription program that's kind of affordable. Now I get to drive the premium versions of every Subaru that I want for months on end, right? So now you get to the point where you're in this subscription program and you're driving a BRZ, you're driving an STI Limited, you're driving an Outback Limited Wilderness, you're driving whatever, and you go, wow, this is amazing. And then you get to go back to the dealer and say, you know what? I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy this car because guess what? I got to drive this thing. I got to go camping in this thing. I know what it's like to actually drive luxury now. I wouldn't
I want to
normally
own this.
I wouldn't normally go down this road. I wouldn't normally, but like, dude, for me, the chance to drive every Subaru that Subaru makes, when else would you get that opportunity?
A
You
rent to
know?
own. That's an interesting proposition. And actually, I buy in so much more on that premise because I think that it could be, for lack of a better term, a gateway drug. You know, it gets people into it, and maybe they go in to get a subscription, like you said, with or like I said, Hyundai for 2 months. They say, I've tried every Hyundai. I don't like these cars, and then they come over to a subscription to Subaru for $200-$300 more a month, and they try them for a couple months.
Think about this. Let's say the price is $900, right? Would you pay $900 for, let's just call it 2 months where you get to spend 2 months test driving every Subaru that they make, and then you make your decision on what you want to buy? It sounds expensive, but you are getting the chance to really test out and feel out and buy what you want? I think that that's a pretty good opportunity.
I think every company, I'm sure our good buddy Mark at Company 23 would agree that he would love this proposition because now we can get your new prototype, your new brand new release vehicle, and we can do a bunch of prototyping. And we can design a bunch of stuff with 3D scanners and build and design stuff
That
for the
is true.
aftermarket off your cars
My God, that's so funny.
for really cheap. That's immediately where my mind went with it.
Mark wouldn't
Yes,
be
give me give me the new STI for $800, $900 a month. I'll pay $1,500 a month for a month, and I can just basically borrow it for a month, and I can do all my R&D as a company, and I could come out with intakes and everything else and have the fitment be perfect.
That's actually hilarious because I didn't think about that at all. But yeah, Mark would be all over that. That's actually so funny.
I think everybody would. Every company would be like, "Yes, yes, sign us up for this. This would be great. You
This
basically give us a frontline opportunity to your latest and greatest as it comes out for really, really cheap." Because I know there's so many companies that are buying these cars just to have the ability to do this. You know,
Yeah.
it's also a marketing thing, but it's also, yeah, it's a lot of R&D. That's what people I think often overlook is, Cobb or somebody gets to the R&D level with a new model and a new engine. They had
Yeah.
to buy one.
Yeah. Or, you and I have both seen Mark put out a post where he says, like, whoever buys this new model, come to us and we will give you this or that, or like, we just need to
For
take some
free,
pictures.
yeah.
You know, dude, that's a good point. But like,
It's very non-invasive a lot of times. It's usually just measuring stuff, or a lot of times with now modern day technology, it's 3D scanning. You don't even have to take things apart to a certain degree. You can just 3D scan things and go, I've got all the measurements I need.
yeah, I agree. I think that this is potentially groundbreaking. I think that Cadillac, right? Nobody needed to test drive a Cadillac to determine if they needed to buy a Cadillac, right? People who go to the Cadillac dealership are ready to spend Escalade level money and they know what they're getting. I think with
Like I said, sometimes
Subaru,
buy it outright. They can
dude,
just buy it outright.
dude, look at Subaru, right? This is the whole thing. In a test drive at the dealer, you're not going to know if this is the car for you. You're just not. Like some people say they sit in the car and I know that this is the car for me. Like, you're not
Yeah.
driving
I've heard
it.
of extended test drives where they give it to you for 24 hours even, and that's
Yeah.
gracious. But even still, you're right. 24 hours with the car doesn't really give you a feel for owning and living with that car for a month. And then all of a sudden you go, you know what? The wife and I decided we're going to have a newborn, and I
Dude,
think we're going to need something bigger.
my dad was a huge Honda Pilot guy. He loved them when they were the big boxy ones, the 2010s, the 2014s. And then they changed it and it started to look like a minivan. They like curved them out. They didn't look, like they
Mm.
did. And he was nervous about the comfort of in being in the driver's seat for long periods of time because he drives constantly for work. And so for him, like a 24-hour test drive is not enough time to feel out if this car is going to be right for you. And so I think that that is
Wow.
where a lot of these places lose their sales is because
You sold me.
people like my dad, dude, he went right to the Ford dealer and he bought an Explorer. And now he has been in 3 Explorers since that. Honda lost his business. He was buying Honda Pilots and he took these Honda Pilots to 400,000 miles. Like the
Hmm.
fact that you have
He
somebody
loved
that
those
is
cars.
he was a diehard Honda Pilot guy, but because he couldn't guarantee that he was gonna like the next version of the Pilot, he didn't buy it. So,
Wow.
I think that for Subaru, right, there is
I
a
hope Honda's listening to us,
huge
following the
yeah,
podcast.
dude,
They could learn something from this, honestly. This is
I
a
think
powerful message.
it is a huge missed opportunity, dude. That people that worry about look at the argument that's been going on forever about Audi versus BMW, right? What are the chances that it's snowing when you go on a test drive? You know? Like what if like their all-wheel drive systems are like the biggest battle that exists. So like imagine you get to drive a Subaru for a month and it's January. You know that you're going to get to drive that thing in the snow and feel it out. You're going to know if you want to buy this as your winter car.
Oh, I worry about the dealerships. They're going to see an increase of all of a sudden subscriptions on the winter months here in Colorado. We just saw a 200% increase of people that want a subscription for 2 months in the
Yeah.
winter in Colorado.
Yep.
And we don't have the fleet for this. That's again my only other logistical worry. I think that this has to be very much supported by the manufacturer. I don't think that this would survive if you just put it on the dealerships because
I'm
ultimately
gonna just
the dealerships are independent franchises in a sense. You know that.
I'm gonna say this very confidently because I've worked at a lot of dealers. Dealers fuck up everything. They don't know what they're doing. They just run backwards. The problem with dealerships is that there's all these people on the top and they're all trying to make their money and they don't care about anything else going on underneath them. Like some of these owners, they're very nice. They want to meet the people, they're very forward friendly people. But like at the end of the day, right? They just say, service department, figure it out. Make me money. I don't care how you're doing it. I don't even know how you're doing it. I just know that I hired you to do this, so you do that. You know, like as far as like car sales go, they probably understand that a little bit better and they're a little bit more involved in that. But I think that as far as like the parts and like service centers and stuff like that, they usually don't really
They're
know what's
generally
going
not.
on. So
You're right.
like to put a program like this in the hands of a dealer, you're going to have people that are handling this, right? That like do know how it works, don't know how it works, don't really care for it, people who aren't pushing it because this is the thing. When corporate comes down and says, "This is what we're doing," they do it, you know? You look at Ford, right? I'm loving this microphone today. You look at Ford, right? Ford decided that they were going to do mobile service and they were going to do Ford mobile service vans. They were going to have all Ford tools in a compressor and they were going to have all this stuff jammed in this van. And guess what? The dealers are going to buy the van for like $100,000. Like it's a fully built transit with everything you could ever, it's a literal rolling shop in a van, right? That van is sitting at all of these dealers doing nothing. It's sitting there and they're not taking it out. When I worked at the Ford dealer, they got paid $70 to go to an appointment and $70 to come back from the appointment. They were getting $140 just for the van leaving the parking lot. So what they would do is they would go and they would plug in, they would do an OBD update on a car, and then they'd come back. They were only doing computer updates. They would not do oil changes. They would not do any kind of actual maintenance. They wouldn't do filters. They were like, sorry guys, we're having some weird camera difficulties, but we were just talking about the dealer. And, you know, I think the main point about this is that with these dealers, I just feel like they don't prioritize the things that need to be prioritized. And I think that if you were to leave this in their hands, sorry, kind of like, kind of like the Ford truck setup that we were just talking about, it would be misused. It would not be done properly, right?
Yeah. You would have to have manufacturer oversight, I think.
And you know what? You know what they could do, Dave? They could sub it out. Doesn't even have to go through the dealer. Call up Carvana, right? Carvana has all their trucks running around delivering cars every which way, right? You ship Carvana 10 or 20 or 30 of each vehicle. Carvana is only really in major cities, like their actual like car vending machine where they go get the
Yeah.
cars. So
They're also, I think, facing like class action lawsuits right now. So maybe not Carvana,
well, you get
but
what I mean, though, like, Driveway, same thing, they have the same process, like, these companies that do this,
yeah.
they have a ton of tow trucks, they go, they deliver the car, they bring it, I think that, where Subaru might be, like, scared of the logistics or scared of the insurance or whatever, this is where you get another company to do the dirty work for you, but you pay them, or you get the subscription fee to be it's like you team up with them. You're using their Subaru doesn't wanna go buy tow trucks to have to make this work. Like, why this is where you just pick up another company and you're like, "Hey, listen, let's make something happen. We could do this together." I know that you're kind of including somebody else in your deal, but if you're putting customers first, I really feel like Subaru should do something like that. It's more about the customer experience and making sure that they get to experience the full lineup, And, think about Boxer Fest when we went, right? How many cars did they bring to Boxer Fest? They had all the EVs and everything there. You could check it out, you could sit in it, but you couldn't drive it, Like, I think that
And it's not like you said, like long term, or not even long term, but longer term exposure to the brand. That could be a whole nother can of worms where manufacturers start competing on a different level. Because all of a sudden, like I said, you're trying out something, and you know what? I've always wanted to drive a Tesla. Maybe I'd do it for a month. Man, this thing really sucks. I hate having to find chargers that actually work, and I never have the right adapter. And you know what? This is not for me. 2 weeks later, I'm done.
dude, I think another company that would benefit totally from this, Dodge, because who doesn't want to drive a Ram Rebel or get in a Charger or a Challenger, an RT, a Hellcat? Like, who doesn't want to be able to swap in and out of all of the Dodge products? Who doesn't want to be able to go down and hop in a Jeep Wrangler and go to the beach and then come back to the Jeep dealer and swap into a or swap into a like a Challenger, Like, I think that, like, the difference, right, between Subaru and Dodge is that Dodge has all the cars under their umbrella. Let's say you got family in town for Thanksgiving, you go pick up a Chrysler Pacifica, I think that, like, that's
Yeah.
how like, you wanna talk about, like, dying brands? If you put all of them under one subscription and you could switch in and out of any of the cars, then who cares, I think that you're gonna be getting people who've only driven Chryslers in a Dodge. You're gonna getting people that have only driven Dodges in a Jeep. You're just spreading people into different cars that you put out, and they're gonna like things about them, and then you're gonna
Yeah.
turn you know what I mean?
They're gonna have to absolve pretty much all the liability, though, because at the same time, you can't just expect someone to get into a Charger or, "Oh, I'm gonna go my first Jeep Moab excursion
That would be
wreck this
awesome.
thing," and
You don't
next
own
thing
it.
you know, but now you do because you rolled it over.
So this is where things don't make sense to me because, like, the whole reason that I hate buying a car or leasing a car is because I hate going through the process of doing all the paperwork and getting my credit run and the down payments, and it's just like a whole process. You spend a whole day at the dealer. I have people that have gone through nightmares at the dealer. They've been there for 3, 4, 5 days. The dealer can't figure the shit out, you know? I think people are so tired of it. Like, I bought my last car, through Driveway. They shipped it out to me from Washington. I didn't touch a dealer. I did everything online. Boom, appeared in my driveway. Best thing I ever did. You know, I think that had to do all the research on my end of like looking for what I wanted, and like I found it, and it was perfect. It was everything, dude. Best deal ever. I think that like as far as what you're saying, you have the lawyers write up all the legal stuff and you sign it. Is what it is. If you are going to get into this subscription program, it should say in very clear writing, you are responsible for any kind of crashes that happen in this car. That's why you have car insurance. Your car insurance should cover whatever stupid shit you do in a freaking Hellcat that you get in for $900 a month. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And that's my point. It's not going to be simply and that might be a little bit of logistics of the swap over of all of a sudden you want to go from a Chrysler Pacifica to a Hellcat. You might have to spend an hour or two at the dealer, or rather on the phone with your insurance, switching things over, you know? And some like there's going to have to be some, it's not going to be like, hey, here you go, Mr. Smith, here you go. Here's the keys to whatever you want.
And you want to know something else, Dave? Another reason why this is a win for every single person that goes to a dealer, there's no negotiating. The price is the price. You're not going to the dealer and this guy is telling you that he could knock $1,000 off the car, and that
you go to a special office, it'll be one or two guys.
And then like you bring in your 2022 trade-in and they tell you it's only worth $3,000 and fuck you. And like, it's just like, I feel like that's their whole scam, is like the price is never the price. The guys that are in the office of the dealer are making a ton of money. That's why the dealer looks so bougie when you walk in it. Doesn't matter if it's Subaru dealer. When you walk in that door, right, you're paying for the coffee machine. You're paying for the lights. You're paying for these guys' suits. Like, there's a lot of money in dealers, and it's because they mark this shit up, and they have their sales process, and they're doing all these drops, and they're trying to make their percentages. Fuck your percentage. Give me the car. Here's $900 a month. I'm going to go drive everything you guys own. Thank you. Bye. I feel like that's my mentality, is like they can still make good money on a program like this. I think that at the end of the day, right, it makes the salesman's jobs even easier. You know why? Because I just drove this Outback wilderness for a month and I freaking love it. I'm in love with it. I'm coming back here to tell you that I'm going to buy this car because now I know 100% this is the car for me and I want it. So I think that like this sleaziness and trying to get people to buy cars, that's why salespeople are at a dealer. You know why? Because you are never 100% that you want this car, because you have not had it long enough to make that decision. And that's all I have to say. Mic drop. I am like, the more I talk about this, the more I am like wholeheartedly behind this, because I think that it's not fair to go to a place to buy a car and they make you make that decision on the spot. And like, even if they let you take the car for 24 hours, dude, it's like a house. You have to go, dude. Now, like when I was buying a house, people are paying over list price. They've been in the house for 5 minutes. They're putting offers on the table. They don't even know the neighborhood. They don't even know where they're at. They're just getting in the house and they're buying something. And now they got to fix everything that they didn't actually look at until after. But that's the thing. This is why house purchases take so long, right? You make the offer, but you don't own it yet. You make the offer, you go in, you negotiate, you do your proper inspections to make sure that this is the house that has good bones, everything's good on it. You're doing your due diligence on the area, like there's so much that goes into buying a house because it's a big purchase and you want to make sure that it's right for you. There's a whole laundry list.
You're right. I always say a car is the second biggest purchase people will ever make in their lives.
And they want you to, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's a valid point. They want you to make that in 30 seconds. Is this the right car for the next 10 years for you? I don't know.
Yeah.
Things might change. And like you said, things do change. That's part of life. So I think that's a valid contention that this could be a really good, for lack of a better term, maybe a gateway drug, for people. It's a stepping stone for people to get into car purchasing because, as we've talked about on a previous episode, people are less interested in purchasing a car these days. And maybe this is one of those s- big reasons is that people are faced with the proposition of purchasing a car when they don't know if it's the right car for them.
You know why people love Teslas right now? It's because when you get in a Tesla, they're all the same. They don't have to question whether or not they're going to like a Tesla. It's just a question of, do you want a small one or do you want a big one? It's the same fucking thing. It's, the thing with a Subaru is they're all different. They're different cars and they have different engines and they have different options and they do different things. And like, don't expect me to walk into a dealer and sit in a car for 5 minutes and you ask me about if I have kids and if I go camping and whatever. And then you expect me to go do a loop around the neighborhood and say, you know what? This is the car for me. And I'm taking it today, right now for $50,000 and I'm going to keep it for 10 years. Like,
Yeah, that's true. That's a valid point.
I, you know, I,
I think you're right.
I just, not to beat a dead horse here, but I gotta say, this is like a genius idea. And I think that whoever is doing the dealership stuff at Subaru, you need to start looking at this. If you have the power to make any dealer do anything you want, right? You're the mastermind behind their existence, right? Dealerships are becoming harder to own and whatever. This could be the saving grace. I think Cadillac tried it. It didn't work because they didn't do it the right way and they've had the wrong crowd. But like with a brand like this, you're missing the opportunity. They were too expensive. Nobody could, like, for $2,500 a month, like, people are like, why would I want to drive 4 different Cadillacs? It's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just funny even hearing me say
I
that
want an
because
Escalade. I have the money. It's in a duffel bag out back
yeah,
in
yeah.
cash, unmarked bills.
Yeah, I'm gonna pay you a mortgage payment so I can choose between a CTSV or a Cadillac Escalade. That's it. What else would I want to drive? Nothing. There's nothing else in your lineup. I don't want to get in an ATS. I don't want to get in an
I
XTS.
walked in the door knowing what I wanted to buy.
Yeah, like dude, like they just like again, like what people who buy Cadillacs, they could go get in a Cadillac and drive it for the day and they'll know whether or not they want a Cadillac. Like I feel like that's a pretty straightforward decision. Like,
Yeah.
like when you go to buy a Rolex, right? You're not like, man, I really gotta try out this Rolex, make sure it's the one for me. Like, no, it's a Rolex. Like, you know, like
Yeah.
when you go and you're at the you're at the store and there's a watch there that you've never heard of or I just feel like you
Can you imagine a Lamborghini rental or a subscription model like this? It's like, no, that wouldn't. Wow.
so funny you say that. There is something like that.
Wait, what?
So an old neighbor of mine used to be on something like this. He actually totaled his Lambo. They totaled all 3 of them, I think, in the same day. So there are these like car clubs where all of these people buy in, right? And they have like a
Okay, no,
pot of
that's different.
well, I'm saying it's kind of the same thing though, because every week he would come home with a different car. So like, they have a pool of cars and they kind of all pay into it, into like the insurance fund or whatever. And then they kind of like move the cars around. So like he would have a monster truck, he would have a Lambo, he'd have a Ferrari, and like these cars they would just cycle through. And so, him and a group of all of his other rich friends would just kind of be like, well, I got the Lambo this week, and then they'd go race on the highway. So I think that like that's more of like a car club kind of like thing. But
Mhm.
again, it's kind of the
It's a
same
group
deal.
buy.
You're paying a group buy. You're paying into it, and then you have all these cars that you guys are just kind of like flipping around. So I think that like Dave and I are very interested. We want to know what you guys think. This is a possibly big deal that could happen. Maybe I don't know. Now we are going to talk about Subaru and what they put out recently. Now, Dave, let's talk about it. I'm going to put this on the screen. Anybody listening? Um, we have the lineup.
Hmm.
So Dave and I don't really want to also beat this dead horse. I feel like it has been, talked about ad nauseum at this point.
Hmm.
I just want to touch on a couple things. STI, boo. Boo, boo. I don't care for this. I think it's like, again, this is the thing, right? I think that people get this confused. STI has always been a trim package. I think that we have all been there and talked about this. People think that when you mention the word STI, right, you're getting a DCCD, you're getting the 2.5 EJ, you're getting, like I just think that like you're getting a 6-speed. Like the STI has always been a trim package. I don't think that there's any reason to believe that you're always going to get the same things when an
The
STI is put.
WRX has always been a trim package in a way. It's Subaru Impreza, WRX, STI. Wait, what? What is it? It's an aardvark. It doesn't know what it is.
I I think that the split for me is when you go to turbo, right? So I think that like when you talk about it in a way of like trim packages, I think you're right that the WRX is a trim package in a way, but I do think that adding a turbo makes it a different car. I think that like that's where this car comes to life, and that's where you kind of get like a different situation.
It's like a 3 Series M3.
Yeah. You know, I think that like this WRX STI Sport is just my opinion on it, Dave. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like it's a lame cop out. I think that like they didn't make this car in an STI package, and people in Japan are probably going to buy them and they're going to want an STI package. They haven't had one in a couple
They've been
years.
waiting for this. They haven't had anything that we've had. I think for the
And
first time, we're looking at it in reverse roles where, you know what? We've all been jealous of the JDM for so long. And you know what? They've listened and they've given us a lot. And you know what? Maybe they haven't listened to the JDM as much because that market seems like they're missing out on some things and some of the innovation that we've gotten.
now something else here, I think, unless you have anything else, I'm going to move on from the STI because I don't think there's really much to talk about. It's basically
Yeah, no, that hasn't already been covered beyond what just a quick side anecdote that I think that the STI is not dead. It'll come back, McRib. I stand on the McRib. They're doing some prototype testing for anyone. It's already been covered a lot in length. We won't beat a dead horse, but um I think that the STI will be making a return. They're just doing a lot of prototype testing right.
yeah. Um. So STI meh. I think you guys have heard it from everybody at this point. It's a meh thing. When it came out, I remember, I think you saw the video too, where they pull the cover off it and it was just silence. Nobody was like ecstatic about it. They just kind of were like, eh. Um Now the Lavorg STI Sport R Black Limited to STI Performance, mouthful. Um you know, I guess I never really realized the body style of the Lavorg. I always thought it was a little bit sleeker, kind of like more of like a sporty kind of like wagon. Um, I don't really love it in yellow. I think that like the yellow has always been a WRX thing. And I think that for some reason that body style for me, it's just not doing it. I think it's just
I refute the yellow being a thing because we have a bright yellow Subaru Baja. So
like on the Baja it looks great. I just, this is giving me taxi van vibes. You know,
that's
I think
fair.
I think I'm getting this like I live on the East Coast and I'm just envisioning seeing a taxi sign on top of this and it pulling up in New York. Like
Which actually I would not be opposed to. If this thing pulled up as a taxi and picked me up, let's go.
that would be awesome. Um, cool car. I don't love it, but I think that it would, if the Lavorg was in the States, I would own one. So hard for me to be, be I guess I'm a little neutral, I guess. um WRX S4 STI Sport R Black Limited to STI. Now, for you guys listening, this is really interesting to me because it's essentially a new WRX STI that they put a wing on. I think that like it's interesting to me that the WRX STI Sport doesn't have a wing, but when they came out with the S4, they put the wing on. Personally, I would be a little bit more caught off guard by this if I didn't already see everybody putting wings on these cars. I think that I've seen this enough times. I think that it looks good in yellow. It's not a bad looking car. I think it again, you know, that's the other thing, Dave. Like a lot of people have always had mixed opinions on these fenders with the black on them. And I think that like
Mhm.
with the yellow, it kind of looks good. Kind of works. I don't hate it.
I like it. I'm also a fan of louvers, so
Yeah. I just don't feel like if I bought one of these, especially with the black lip on the front, I don't feel like I would want to paint them. I don't think that every other one of these that I've seen, like that top one, the WRX STI Sport, the blue with the black, I would want to paint those blue. Like, because I just don't think it looks good with the black on the blue. But I gotta say, the black and yellow, man, checks
it
out.
works. Yeah.
Anything else on that from you?
No, I guess, I'm sure you're already heading there, but the thing I really wanna talk about is the GT300 car.
Yes.
That's something that really excites me.
So before we get there, we got one more here. Or yeah, I guess we'll put them together. Impreza STH STI Performance Edition with Plus package.
Mhm.
I gotta tell you that out of all of these cars, I hate this one the most. I do not like the look of this thing. I think that the headlights just remind me of some like Mazda Infinity kind of car. It just it's giving me, like, a really not great look. I don't love it. I think that it's nice to have an Impreza hatch or, something for people to get as, like, a base model or, whatever. I think it's not a bad car for, like, a daily. I just think that, like, for me, don't call it an Impreza. I don't like it. So, um, now something that was talked about a lot that I think is really interesting is the all new race cars for this. So first we have the Super Taikyu Series 2026 and we have the Subaru BRZ GT300. Now, Dave, the first thing that came up was the Super Taiku, which is the Subaru hatch, right? I believe you were telling me about the engine on this. Now,
Yeah.
I know the GT300 has an interesting, well, basically the all three of these. They also have the VBH Japan Rally Championship car. Something that is interesting is that the H6 has come back. Being that they are messing around with an H6, even though it's not the 3.3, it's the 3.0 that they've come up with. A couple notes that have been made is that like this could potentially be a production STI engine that they're going to rock. I think that there's a lot of room for them to mess around with an engine like that and determine if they want to put it in a new car or not. And being that they told us that the next wagon is going to be 400 horsepower, I think that that is the right powertrain to make that happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued because, at first, I was a little thrown off because I saw mm, some designation kind of, uh, curveballs, if you will, where they were designating it as kind of like a modern twin turbo EG33, and I was like, 33? That would signify it's a 3.3 liter, which is interesting. But in fact, it is a 3.0. So it's a 3 liter. Um, it's closer. It's kind of a hodgepodge, if you will, between the EG series of engine, which was a 3.3 liter, and their subsequent following of the EZ 3 liter, and then the EZ 3.3, or 3.6. Sorry. Um, and so I think it's really an amalgamation of Subaru kind of culminating their different technologies on, what a six-cylinder engine, might look like and might be able to do, and they're doing a lot of, investigating and prototyping in that space. I think it harkens back to one of the earlier episodes we did with we talked about Subaru's failed engine of the Flat 12, which did not work out and for numerous reasons, but they've always been I think Subaru's really been keen about trying to dance around this six-cylinder platform because I think they recognize it has like a lot of the passionate enthusiasts of the six-cylinder Subaru engines would agree, it has its particular attributes,
Yeah.
unlike any other Subaru engine, that's a traditional four-cylinder. Um, I mean, one of which is inherently it comes with a ton of torque. And so from a motorsport, racing standpoint, that might be really, really beneficial to what Subaru is looking for, especially because they're coming off of a 2 liter, to go to a 3 liter is pretty considerable, um, I mean, they basically skipped a step in terms of Subaru, nomenclature. They went from a 2.0 to a 2 instead of a 2.5, they said, "Screw it, we're gonna go right to 3 liters,"
Yeah.
and we're gonna add on 2 more cylinders. And I'm sure they've done some prototype level, manufacturing where they have reduced weight in the pistons and things like that to where they can spool it up faster. They might have, differential sizes of, piston changes versus cylinder diameters and actual strokes, to do what they want to do. But the fact that they've already twin turboed it and they're already, committed to going racing with this thing, I think really speaks to the testament that I'm saying of Subaru really doubling down in a sense of saying, we're not giving up on this technology. We really think there's a benefit and there's something that we could derive from this. And who knows, maybe we see a production, six-cylinder return to Subaru
Yeah.
because they've been without one for a while now. The last one was the 3.6 liter that they haven't had for a while now. And I think maybe they're prototyping a future replacement, which is funny because everyone thought, well, we're going from a 2.5 liter turbo in the WRX to a 2.4 liter, and we're sizing down. Everyone's getting smaller. Well, maybe they're going from a 3.6 to a 3.0, but they're going to also turbo it.
It's funny to me that you and I also talked about this in a previous podcast about how it was just inevitable that this H6 was going to come back. I think that we were saying that like they made such a good engine that there's no way that Subaru is just going to walk from it if they're going to continue building engines. And I think that this
Hmm.
is a clear example of like they see the potential and they are pushing the limits on something that we thought would never see daylight again. And
Yeah.
I saw a lot of comments from a lot of big names in the Subaru community saying, like, "Don't get your hopes up, we'll never see this in production." Um, Subaru is not known for going backwards on things like this, but something tells me in my gut that Subaru is a company that when they make something that is really solid, they really stand behind it, and I think that being that this is going in a race car and they're gonna be testing it and they're gonna be able to see what it's capable of, I could see it coming back. I don't think that this is the end of the H6. I think that there is potential
Yeah,
there.
I
So,
agree.
yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to wait and see, and, we'll keep an eye out and see what comes of it, but I do really love the hatchback, though, the race car. I think that that looks really cool. They did a good job with that. And,
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess we'll have to just, see what comes. I know that everybody's waiting for more announcements and things on future STI updates, but I think for right now, I think we're all just kind of in the zone of, like, this isn't what we asked for, and we're just kinda waiting for the next thing. So,
Yeah. I think we have to be
again,
patient though.
yeah. Again, I think that this for me wasn't super exciting, and I think that, we'll just have to wait and see what happens, so, but Dave, I think you and I can agree, it's a good place to stop, and we will catch you guys all on the next one.